About a year ago, I made a video wondering whether or not I should get a coach. I should have done this way sooner. What's that, mate? Yeah, just 2 more to go. I gotta go back to the intervals. Let's do it. I'm almost 4 years into this cycling journey now. In the early days, the progress came fast. Just riding consistently, pushing hard, being out there. That was enough to see big improvements. But lately, the gains have been harder to measure. My FTP has hovered between 300 and 330 watts for over a year. Some weeks I feel strong, other times not so much. My weight's been slowly trending down, which helps, but that kind of gain isn't endless. The one thing that has changed is my durability. I can ride at higher power for longer now. I've done more events, peaks, fondos, road races, Zwift races, but all the demands are so different. And that's where I started to hit a wall. I wasn't sure what workouts I should be doing. I'd use training plans, but half the time I didn't know which ones to follow or when I needed to tweak them. Platforms like Trainer Road were tempting, but I also wanted guidance. I wanted to learn about racecraft, nutrition, strength work, how to view zones better, and not just guess at them. I wanted someone who could give me the full picture. So I've decided it's time to stop guessing. It's time to level up. I've started working with Dr. Stephen Lane, and in this series, I'm going to share exactly what that journey looks like. This is not pro-level cycling. I'm just a moderate dude who is trying to train smarter and see what is possible. And if you've ever wondered whether coaching might be right for you, maybe this will help. Let me introduce the coach I'll be working with this season, Dr. Stephen Lane. If you've done Peaks Challenge, you might already know the name. Stephen's been part of that event for years, and for the last 2 seasons, I've been using his Peaks training plan as the basis for my own preparation. We finally met properly at Peaks 2025 and connected over a shared passion for the sport, for the challenge, and for helping other riders get more out of themselves. Stephen isn't just a coach, he's an athlete too. He recently won Lintang Flores, a 1,000-kilometre ultra-endurance race in Indonesia. It has over 18,000 metres of climbing. So when he talks about training and performance, it's coming from both sides, research and real-world experience. On the academic side, he holds a PhD in exercise physiology. He's worked with elite-level athletes and teams, and he runs a coaching business called HP Tech. That business focuses on practical, science-based training for everyday riders and racers. When I realised I wanted to be more intentional with my training, to stop guessing and start learning, Stephen was the first person I reached out to. And now we're kicking things off. In this episode, you'll see a coach's response to the burning questions from a new athlete. What does a coach actually do? What do the first few weeks of working together look like? And what athletes like me should expect from the process. Okay, Stephen, thanks for joining me today. So here we are, your newest client, and straight away he's sticking a camera in your face. For our chat today, I have a few questions. These all come from the perspective of an athlete that's looking to take the next step in their training. The athlete who might be teetering on the edge of getting a coach. Shall we get started?
Yeah, man. Ready when you are.
All right, so question 1. What does a coach actually do for a cyclist at my level?
So I would say, look, you're over the infancy and you're probably kind of somewhat reaching your genetic limit. Like, we've figured out you're not an Olympic athlete because you don't have the genes for it. So I guess now when a coach steps in, if you've just been doing bunchies, some structure, then a coach starts to provide accountability and I guess a general overview of like what you've been doing, and we are here to fill in the gaps, and I guess target your physiology and what you're strong at and help you figure that out. I guess an athlete tends to just do what they always do, like they revert back to what they enjoy doing, and I guess a coach steps in to look at the big picture and go, okay, have you tried doing this? Or for a specific event, knowing what physiological demands that's going to require, and actually knowing from experience what sort of efforts I guess enhance that physiological capacity.
Yeah, okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense.
Funnily enough for you, specifically to you and specifically to, let's say, middle-aged men, a lot of the time I'm putting a lid on them because they just want to ride their bike too much, or they're doing too much intensity. They love Zwift racing, and it's me saying, hey, you need to rest. The last time you had a rest was 12 months ago. Have a break, let's start again.
Yep, guilty as charged on that one. So that probably leads me into the next question. How do you approach building a training plan for a new athlete?
Someone new, it's a bit of a learning process my end. It is figuring out availability. Someone like yourself, the biggest problem is how many hours a week you've got available. Usually it's a big time budget. Let's say pro cyclist or young cyclist who's at uni, has a lot of time on their hands. Someone like yourself, full-time job, family. You say, okay, I've got 12 hours a week. I've got to figure out how to best use those 12 hours and convey to you to make the most of the time. If you've got more time, make the most of it. Don't necessarily do the 2 hours I put in, try and do more. The big part my end is figuring out where you've got available to ride. So you're in Sydney, not the best place to ride a bike, to be honest. I'd rather you be in somewhere like Adelaide, where you've got hills at your doorstep. The ability to do longer efforts when you're sort of central Sydney based is hard. So I guess that's where I've got to try and go, okay, well, maybe this is a trainer session instead. Figuring out your long-term goals. For most people, let's say at the moment, that's Amy's Fondo World Champs up in October. And then figuring out what your short-term goals are as well. Like, what do we need to work on in that time frame that we've got? That's about it, really. Like, it's actually not that complicated. I say for an athlete, the big part is it's kind of like going back to uni and you're doing a uni course if you haven't had a coach before. I'm here with lots of experience and guidance, and you're here to learn, and I don't want to work for you, I want to work with you. I hate it just when someone says, tell me what to do. I'd rather say, hey, what do you feel like you need to be doing? And then let's come up with a strategy based around that.
What sort of data do you care about the most? Is it about having power and power data, HR data, or is it really important to have that subjective feedback like RPE and things like that?
I'm a big data fan. As most people know, if you know HP Tech, I've got a science background. Having clean data in Training Peaks is pretty important to me, and so I spend and pride myself on making sure someone's Training Peaks data is clean for starters, so there's no crazy numbers in there that don't make sense, because that's a big guide. When you're a remote coach, that's really all you've got to go by. The key one's going to be power. I definitely always try and use heart rate as well. The HRV data, sleep data, look, it can feed into Training Peaks, but I don't really look at it that much. Heart rate and power, and understanding the relationship between those two things for you. Heart rate is very much influenced by training status. The fitter you are, the harder it is to get your heart rate up, and it's understanding those relationships and not using it to compare, like your heart rate versus someone else's you just can't compare. But for me, definitely power is king. I quite often, there is a relationship between the power duration curve, and I kind of use that to go, all right, this block's all about 5-minute power development, and we work on that.
When we're kicking off and getting started, what are the things that you're looking for in the first few weeks, or what are maybe the things that you're going to get me to do in the first few weeks of working with me?
First thing I always do is what I've got is my HP Tech step test. It's kind of similar to a ramp test, but it's 2.5 minute stages, 25 watts a stage, and you go till you pop. That I've done thousands of times, and I know the numbers pretty well. So that helps me set up your training zones. I have a lot of people come on board and they say you're at their FTPs, 300 watts, for example, and then I look at their data and I'm like, you've never even done 20 minutes at 300 watts. How is your FTP that level? So usually I'm here to reel them back in and say, look, let's be realistic. From there, I guess I try and then figure out, look, we'll talk about long-term goals, but I'm there to figure out what's going to work for you. Like, when do you ride a bike? Is it in the morning? Is it in the evening? Do you have a bunch ride you do regularly? Is it winter and you're doing lots of Zwift racing because you're part of a Zwift team? Do you have a bunchie on the weekend you do? And then I'm trying to figure out, all right, when can I give this person the intervals that we actually need to be doing, and not just turn them into a robot that doesn't have any social outlet anymore without bunch rides and things. There's a lot of people out there that, they're already good bike racers and they're ready to go, but other people need, I guess, a positive introduction to racing or training so that they actually feel like they're ticking the boxes instead of going into sessions where they fail them. I try not to set them up for failure. So yeah, sometimes it's just figuring that out to start off with.
So that's probably a good segue into my next question. How much of coaching in your perspective is about the physical training versus maybe mental coaching or even just lifestyle support?
Yeah, it's a good question. I sometimes feel like I'm just someone's personal life organizer sometimes, and I'm just trying to build a program around, kids, sport, work, travel, wife commitments, things like that. Look, my general rule is, training wise, if you can get 90% of it done 90% of the time, you're pretty good. Trying to turn every single session green in Training Peaks is not necessarily achievable, and you've got to be aware that that's okay and be okay with it, not feel like you're failing because you're not hitting them. It is definitely, like, a lot of my phone calls each week with athletes is making sure they're mentally okay. Is life getting on top of them? Just making sure they're set up to go, all right, I'm okay with this. Physical, mental, it's a big combination, and as I've been doing this for 15 years or so now, and it's definitely become more of a psychological, I'm a psychologist as well as a coach kind of situation where I think that is important. So yeah, that is a big part of it for me now, is making sure someone's in the right headspace to tackle what we're trying to tackle.
What are some of the mistakes that you see self-coached riders commonly make?
I don't think anyone actually makes mistakes. It's just they keep doing the same thing is the main thing. Their week doesn't change. They don't structure their training so that there's builds and then there's recovery. A lot of the problem I see with full-time workers is they just try and get in as much as they can all the time, 12 months of the year. And let's say, for example, their chronic training load is just this plateau. And if I see that really tends to be someone that I would say becomes stagnant and burnt out because they do the same thing all the time. If you look at what I do with an elite level rider or myself, I tend to just ramp up over X period, could be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months. You really build it up as much as you can, and then you work towards an event, then you back it off, you have a rest, so your training load becomes more of a sawtooth. And I really see that's where you get peaks in performance as opposed to just plateaus in performance.
I think beginner or sort of new athletes tend to get caught up in the numbers a lot. Like, I know myself, you look at CTL and you want to try and increase your CTL. I know that FTP is this number that you kind of get hung up on a lot. I think a lot of new athletes, they kind of get to 4 watts per kilo FTP and they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to go to 5 watts per kilo, and don't necessarily realize that the leap between 4 and 5 watts per kilo is massive.
Yeah, and they don't, like, it's not like you're a musician where the more you practice, the better you get. There's a physiological limit for most people. And, I ride a bike a lot and I don't get better and better. I've kind of reached my physiological capacity, and as someone starts cycling, they see big improvements relatively quickly. But then after a while they stop getting better, but they have these unrealistic ambitions that they're going to keep getting better at the same rate. And, getting your FTP from 250 to 300 might happen in a 6-month period for somebody. But once they're there, it might take Might take 2 years of continuous training for it to go up by 20 watts because it is that law of diminishing returns. You need to do more, and it's a very slow process. And consistency is the key in that, and it's overload and changing your training structure. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. They just go, oh, well, I'm at 4 watts a kilo, I want to get to 5, and they're already kind of capped out with their genetics, and it's pretty hard to get them to where they want to be.
Yeah, definitely can relate. So with that in mind, what are some realistic expectations an athlete can have coming into a coach?
A coach-athlete relationship should nearly be friends. If you've got a coach that you just speak to now and then and communication's bad, I think that's bad. I think an athlete should also expect that a coach pays attention to their data and is clean. I have a lot of athletes that come to me from other coaches that have used Training Peaks, and I look at their Training Peaks data and I'm like, this is a mess. Like, the power profile curve, their power meter's stuffed up and it doesn't tell the real picture. They've done 2,000 watts for 5 minutes and a coach hasn't cleaned that up. That's pretty important my end if that's the only data that you've got. How can you know what an athlete's capable of and give them feedback if you haven't got real data to be feeding them? So yeah, communication and data is a big part. Having a coach that you kind of send them a message and you don't hear from, that cracks me. I like to pride myself on the fact that I'm there all the time for an athlete. My basic rule is send me a message and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. That's it really. Like you're paying a lot of money most of the time these days. It's not cheap and it's a luxury for most people. You should get what you're paying for, which is attention to detail and good communication and a good long-term vision and short-term vision.
It's interesting that you mentioned money, because I think a lot of people are going to come into coaching thinking, well, I'm going to make this financial investment and that's going to translate into a performance outcome. Is that a realistic expectation for an athlete to have?
Yeah, I guess that's hard to answer. Like, it is a big outlay, and I don't know, maybe I've watched a few of your old videos, and it's funny when people get into cycling originally, they're like, oh, I've got these wheels now, and now I've spent $2,000 and now I'm going 3 kilometers an hour faster. Like, yeah, maybe to start off with, that's a better investment for money. But I think as you run out of those marginal gains, then having a coach to actually to guide you is then a better financial return. There's no point in buying a new bike and a new fancy kit if that's not going to actually make you faster.
So something that we spoke about before was about kind of understanding the time commitment that an athlete can have and how much time they can put in. You as a coach are really trying to help them balance that. Can I expect good results even without being able to commit pro hours?
Yeah, it's a good question. Usually one of the first things I ask in the first conversation with an athlete is, how many hours do you have? If they say, look, I've only got 10 hours a week, I'm kind of like, that's going to be hard to get improvements with only 10 hours a week. So you do need to weigh up, like, as an athlete, do I have enough time to warrant taking on this coach? If you've got 15 hours a week in general, plus or minus a little bit in the bigger weeks, that's plenty of available time to make progress. But if you tend to be, and a lot of people's ambitions tend to outweigh their actual realistic availability. So they say, oh yeah, I reckon I could probably do 15, 16 hours in my bigger weeks. And then as we get going after the honeymoon period of the first month, and then they start to kind of wane a little bit and they're back to like 8 to 10, and they're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm getting better, or they're missing, the key session each week because they don't have time, then yeah, you do need to weigh up, like, is this worth it? I'll initiate the conversation saying, you've been missing a lot of these, do you really want do you want another invoice or not, kind of thing.
So you think that a periodic engagement with a coach is something that can work for some people too?
100%. Yep. If you're, a lot of people have holidays coming up and they're like, look, I've got a 12-week block here where I really want to focus on getting better at something, or I've got a certain event. I do have short-term athletes that come on board, and I've got a lot of athletes that just come and go. They'll, once a year they'll say, hey, I'm going over for a tour in the Pyrenees in Europe or something, and I just want a big training block to get me ready. I have a lot of athletes that come and go because they just like the structure, and they know that when they engage me for a certain period, they do, they're more accountable, and then they'll actually get it done. So yeah, people do come and go. Like a month at a time is kind of a waste. It takes me a little while to actually get the ball rolling with somebody. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a long-term engagement where someone's on board.
We're just kicking off our engagement together. You're coming in and you're looking at me and the way that I work. What are some of the things that you're trying to learn about me, or maybe you've already learned them about me, as we get started together?
So as in like what I guess my initial impressions on you, is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, if you've already come to some conclusions, what have you discovered, and how is that going to factor into the way that we work together?
Yeah, look, I guess I've semi-figured you out. You've done a good job. Like you're a smart athlete. You've done your research. You know what you're doing. You enjoy the data. I think the point that you've got yourself to under your own steam is really impressive. What you're kind of higher B grade level now, I suppose. I guess that's where you're at, yeah. And that's as an athlete, I think you are data driven. You enjoy the data, and it's probably why when we sort of first chatted, you were kind of interested in my approach. You know what your expectations are, and I think they're reasonable expectations. You have goals, you know what you want to achieve. You've got some long-term ones, but there's also some short-term ones. I would put you in the box of an athlete that I like to work with, because we're kind of both on the same page. And you, as I said before, you're an athlete that I think we can work together, as opposed to you just say, oh, tell me what to do and I'll do it. But I'm here to, I guess, refine what you've been doing in the past, because I'm not here to completely change it, but we stick the right efforts in and make sure they're different to what you've done, and I think that's where the progress will come from.
Do you see any challenges?
Not really. Like, I think, I can definitely say the path we're going to take the path we will take with you is a path I've been down many times with many athletes. Like, it's, you're in a similar situation to a lot of people. There'll be challenges. Like, the main challenges is, for most people, consistency, and it is like making the most of the time you've got.
So thinking about like keeping on track and keeping on the program, if I had to skip one thing in my training week, what should it not be?
Like, I guess it's the key interval sessions. Like, usually we've got 1 to 2 up to 3 maybe key sessions. I guess for you, when the lack of time availability is in at the right time, you don't want to be skipping the longer rides. Like, I think those endurance rides are the key ones. So you don't want to be going, oh, I didn't get out for the long one again. And then you start looking at your weeks and we're kind of just missing 2 or 3, 4 hours each week continuously. Like, zone 2 is a thing. I'm sick of people banging on about zone 2 at the moment, but that is the big difference, like, between elites and people on a time budget, is aerobic efficiency through, energy expenditure at a not hard pace. That's really what the basis of it is. So really trying to get that in each week at the right time is key. Don't skip the intent that we're doing something with, is probably the big part, as well as just sticking to the program.
All right, so last question. What is something that cyclists often obsess about that doesn't really matter?
I touched on it before, where I was talking about like looking at their chronic training load and wishing that it would go up, but it's not going up. Look, a lot of the times I find people go, oh, is my CTL okay? How's all my numbers going? And my biggest question usually is like, well, how do you feel? They're like, they usually look at the data, and that's the problem. Like, the data in Training Peaks needs to be clean, and it's a mathematical model, and they're worried that they're cooked or they're not doing enough. But a lot of the time I'm just like, look, don't stress about it at all. You could go out and do a 1 minute power PB right now, even though it says that your CTL is as low as it's ever been. Just obsess about being consistent and being hitting the targets, do what you're supposed to do. On the hard days, go hard. On the easy days, go easy. Having an actual day off quite regularly is a good thing. You don't have to be on the bike every single day.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. I'm excited to put everything that we've talked about today into action and start to see the impact of the training that we do together. So thanks a lot.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to, I don't know, I'm assuming we're going to do a few more of these, so hopefully we've got some things to talk about as we make some progress. I'd like to note that you've already been on for a couple of weeks and we've already done a 20-minute power PB the other day, so we must be going in the right direction.
The process is working.
I'm not taking too much credit for it just yet.
Very good. Thanks again, mate.
Thanks, man.
Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed my chat with Dr. Stephen Lane. In an upcoming video, I'm eager to dive into what we discovered from my initial testing and the changes that I've seen in my training and data. Have you considered coaching for yourself? What questions do you have for a prospective coach? What's holding you back from taking the leap? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me continue to bring exciting topics like this to my videos. Other than that, folks, until next time, see ya!